Gran Turismo 1 is one of the most significant games to ever hit our screens. Its impact has sent ripples that I felt not only in other racing games, but the entire game industry. In its genre at least, it can be described as the granddaddy of console racing games. While it's not exactly perfect, it remains iconic, nostalgic, and most importantly for a Gran Turismo game, immersive. The Gran Turismo games are not only renowned for connecting the player to the cars and tracks, but also accurately capturing the sensation of driving. In English, basically the game mechanics are quite immersive, with each car having different handling styles. And it's the same story with the characteristics of each track as well. The iconic styling of the game is also a key factor to its character. The map-style menu screens and rock jazz fusion soundtrack are unique features to the Gran Turismo experience. Right, before I get into the nitty gritty, I'm going to put a disclaimer. This is one of two Gran Turismos that I didn't actually play in its heyday. Instead I played shortly before writing the script. This, combined with the fact that Gran Turismo is my favourite racing game series, may skew any opinions of this video. I will do my best to stay as unbiased as possible, but given that I literally remember my first gaming experience being Gran Turismo, there's no promises. Back to it, Gran Turismo 1 was released December 23rd, 1997 in Japan, and May 8th the following year for the rest of us peasants. During that time, the gaming scene in general wasn't exactly advanced. For example, autosave wasn't a standard feature, online flat out didn't exist, and most games look like this. Gran Turismo, however, looked like this. While most games never exceeded 2 or 3 more licensed products, Gran Turismo was full of them. These innovations, which I'll explain a lot better soon, are what helped Gran Turismo 1 to become one of the greats. Ratings such as a 9.5 from IGN and 96% from Metacritic, as well as being the best-selling PlayStation 1 game with over 10 million copies sold, prove this point. As stated, innovation was one of the major factors of Gran Turismo 1's success. Firstly, Gran Turismo 1 is the game that familiarized players to a proper reward system in a racing game. This was through personally rewarding the player with actual rewards for their efforts. In contrast to this, other games such as Sega Rally would take your lap time and put it on the front screen. That's it. While this is a good concept, it's very limited, and eventually all the sweaty 30-year-olds would leave no hope for the average gamer who just wants to enjoy a fun racing game. Accessibility was another huge factor. Most other racing games at the time were arcade games. While I don't want to keep dragging on these games such as Sega Rally and Daytona, they were the only things close to Gran Turismo in its day, and they were arcade games. Don't get me wrong, there were racing games that weren't exclusively arcade games, however these were mostly cartoonish games such as Polyphony's own MotorToon Grand Prix. And the games that weren't cartoons were either just plain rubbish or suited to a niche market such as the F1 franchise. Think how successful Mario Kart was due to it featuring on home consoles as well. Mario Kart of course falls into the cartoon racer category and is too different to compare to Gran Turismo 1. The big difference was, Gran Turismo was on a disc, on a console that you owned. If you felt like playing it, you just played it. To play Sega Rally, you'd have to spend $1,200 on an arcade machine, or pay every time you want to play it. In Sydney at least, it was around 50 cents to $1 for 2 plays, plus you'd actually have to find the machine too. The sheer amount of things to do in Gran Turismo 1 also contributed to its appeal. License tests, buying, selling cars, racing, modifying, customizing cars, beating lap times, arcade mode. There's just so much to do. On the topic of so much, this game featured a whopping for the time 140 licensed cars and 11 racetracks, featuring the most popular vehicles such as the new at the time R33 GTR, Mark IV Supra, 22B WRX, the Evo 4, Type R Civic, and of course the Mazda. All legends and beasts of the road in their own right. The tracks, while not being real, are still current features of Gran Turismo and have stood the test of time. Deep Forest Raceway, Special Stage, Autumn Ring, High Speed Ring, Trial Mountain to name but a few. To put this into comparison, Need for Speed Heat, which was made over 2 decades later, featured only 127 different vehicles. Another thing we owe credit towards this game for are the iconic analog sticks of the PlayStation controller. Sony and Polyphony worked together to develop the analog stick for this game. While this wasn't a new concept, it was the first mainstream controller to feature 2, and the first time a racing game utilised the bonuses of them. The analog stick changed the game in a massive way, as you can now choose how much steering you wanted to input, instead of just 100% or nothing. This allowed players to really smoothen up their driving, and competitive racing became a bigger focus as a result. The graphics were perhaps the most impressive of all. While this may be hard to believe today, especially since they're more likely to give you cataracts than to impress you, take a step back and you can actually recognise what car you're in. The developers really wanted the players to feel a connection with their car, and they thought this would be impossible if their car looked nothing like their real life counterparts. For the time, Gran Turismo graphics were truly ahead of the pack and forever changed the landscape of gaming as we know it. Alrighty, time to stop saying all the generic Wikipedia shit and get to the fun part, the gameplay, and most importantly, my opinion. So this is actually going to be tricky for me as I didn't play Gran Turismo 1 in its heyday. In fact, at the time of writing this, I've only owned the copy for about a year, and previous to this only played it 2 times. I've also played this game after being subjected to racing greats such as Gran Turismo 4, Forza Horizon, GTA Stunt Races, and Need for Speed Most Wanted, which are all legends in their own right. These games are top for their gameplay, while the nature of Gran Turismo 1 is different, so this should be interesting. Oh, and don't worry, I'll get to a Gran Turismo 4 video eventually. Anyway, if my views are a bit shonky, you know why. That being said, the gameplay is rather slow. I am going to consider the limitations of the PS1, but doing 200 km an hour in Gran Turismo 1 feels like doing 100 km an hour in other games. And the qualifying races are not only rigged, they are unnecessary. There's no way in the Sunday Cup that a Mazda Demio sets a lap time 5 seconds faster than my 240 horsepower Silvia. I do understand they are skippable, but you're on a PS1 so you're still going to be waiting for loading screens. Meanwhile, the actual driving physics are quite solid. The steering feels coarse yet solid, while the accelerating and braking are both well programmed, although it must be hard to mess that up. There are a few small niggles though. Firstly, I can never get the car to stay in a straight line. The high speed stability is quite rubbish. These 2 factors make going down any straight difficult, as you'll require plenty of little micro adjustments to the steering. Focusing on this makes it difficult to set yourself up properly for the incoming corner, or to actually notice it and brake in time. Also, the AI is pretty stupid. They have no care or consideration for anything but the racing line, they rarely overtake each other, and they always seem to gain 100 horsepower on the last 2 corners. Once again, I'm aware that what I'm doing is the equivalent of complaining that the Ford Model T is slow and uncomfortable, but unfortunately this has to be said. On the flip side, the menus feel very welcoming and easy to use. Despite some minor translation errors, they are simple and flow very nicely. They are also accommodated by an absolute killer soundtrack, a common theme with Gran Turismo games. Honestly though, I can sit in the Honda or Nissan dealerships for ages just listening to the music. In fact, the Honda music is already featured in this video. The choices of stuff to do are immense, and using your saved up credits to purchase a car or modify the crap out of a lemon is so satisfying. I can count numerous bad financial decisions I made throughout my playthrough, just because I was window shopping and got carried away. Each dealership is packed with cars, parts and info on everything. You can have a full lesson on modern Nissan just by scrolling through the info section on the cars. The home screen map design is now an iconic staple of old Gran Turismo that we have actually returned to in 7. It flows so naturally and there's no wonder why it stuck around for 4 games. I'm actually going to loop back to the soundtrack because I don't think I talked about it enough. The music ranges from warm, fuzzy, welcoming feeling to flat out bangers. I mean, just listen to this. This is the song they give you to pick your language. Back to the gameplay, besides the detached feeling the cars have to the road, the driving is solid. The controls feel natural and the cars handle nicely under mechanical grip in low to medium speed situations. Also, each car handles differently to each other like they do in real life. This isn't limited to how fast it turns, but more how it interacts with grip and speed. A good example of this is the mid-engine Toyota MR2. As these are rear-heavy cars, they are prone to snap oversteer when you let off throttle mid-corner. As you can see, I had the joys of experiencing this in-game as well. Yet more attention to details in the characteristics of cars is how turbos boost up. In real life, a turbo sacrifices some responsiveness of the car. This is also felt in-game as the power band of big turbo cars mimic what it's like in real life. This game features lots of stuff to keep you busy, and for a 2-decade-year-old game is surprisingly entertaining for today's standards. Gran Turismo was a project that was intertwined with passion, from the idea of the game to its development process. The lead developer Kazunori Yamauchi, which I probably butchered his pronunciation, has stated that the idea of the game stemmed from a love of both video games and cars, and commented on the development saying it took 5 years. In those 5 years, we could not see the end. I would wake up at work, go to sleep at work. It was getting cold, so I knew it must be winter. I estimate I was only home 4 days a year. I don't know about you, but I can't spend 5 minutes on something I'm not passionate about. So this guy and the rest of his crew must either be the most passionate people on earth or simply built different. Yamauchi wanted the player to feel a bond with their car, and a connection with the game as a whole. The licensed cars allow players to relate their car to its real-life counterpart. Add on the customization and the fact that the player actually owns the car, Yamauchi's vision came true. During my playthrough, I chose to do the same tournament 3 times to make money instead of selling my Silvia because I was actually attached to the car and wanted to keep it. The community around this game are also very supportive and loyal thanks to the character of these early games. While the franchise today isn't exactly at its peak,
What is that? What the fuck is that?
there are still legions of supporting fans, including myself, who regularly revisit these older games because they are just that good. If you want evidence of this, look at the comment sections of any Gran Turismo related video. It's usually full of people reminiscing their memories from these games. A large percent of them will be talking about this game in particular and how impactful it has been. In retrospect, when we look back on Gran Turismo 1, we see that the passion, community and innovation surrounding this game has had major effects on not only its franchise, but the entire gaming industry. Games today are always competing to have better graphics than one another, and who was the first to really focus and aim to revolutionize graphics? Many games today feature real brands and licensed products. Many games today now place a large focus on game mechanics and physics, and in many games today, especially racing games beyond the PS3, customization has become an integral part of the gaming experience. Who do we have to thank for all this?
Nice.
A single mainstream console that doesn't feature analog sticks. Gran Turismo literally set the groundwork for many trends in today's gaming, and I believe if there was to be a Mount Rushmore of console games, this should be on it. On top of this, the success of the PlayStation 1 was heavily influenced by the success of this game. It can be argued that the PlayStation may not be where it is today without this game. Games that push the limits and innovate are the spine of the progression of gaming, and Gran Turismo 1 was the first to really do it. Additionally, prior to Gran Turismo, game developers were focused on just making a game that fit the console or platform. Gran Turismo seeked to get the very most out of the PS1 it ran on. During development, Yamauchi was disappointed in Sony that the PS1 couldn't handle more than 12 cars on the track at once, and the other team members reported that many PS1s lost their lives in the development of Gran Turismo 1. In conclusion, Gran Turismo 1 is a cultural classic, not only for fans of old racing games, but old games in general. The limits it pushed and the efforts of the game has had lasting effects that are still felt in the gaming industry today. I and many others think that it is one of the most significant games to ever hit our screens, and should be given far more recognition than it does. If you get the opportunity, I highly recommend you give this game a go. Thank you. End screen stuff, like, comment, literally pound that subscribe button. Thank you.